do I forget
Everyone
not to?
get ready for some serious inspiration from Kimberly.
Thank you, Romy. I am so excited to be here for the Fairy God Boss Inspiration Summit. While they get me fully up and running with tech so I can share my screen, I just want to share that today you're in for a treat. Next Move, Best Move, Transitioning into a Career You'll Love is by far one of my favorite presentations to do. So I hope y'all can see my screen. And I'm going to get right into it today and really kind of dig deeper into what are some career best practices if you're looking to make any type of career transition anytime soon. So again, my name is Kimberly B. Cummings. I am a career and leadership development expert and also a diversity and inclusion professional. I've been working with women and people of color to help them navigate the world of work, make more money, and position themselves as leaders over the past 12 years. I'm the author of a new book called Next Move, Best Move. I'm on the board for an organization called The Power of You Teens, helping young women in Harlem, New York. I am a wife. I am proud to say I'm an auntie 2 times. I have a brand new nephew. He is 2 months old, born on February 1st. And I am a dog mom. I have a COVID puppy. His name is T'Challa. And he definitely believes he is a king because he runs my household. My work has been featured on South by Southwest, Princeton University, Warner Media, PwC, Fox 5, and more. So I am beyond delighted to be with you here today to bring you through this process. So what I did, Next Move, Best Move, my book that's coming out on June 9th is broken down into 4 key parts. So we're going to go over each part today. So y'all are getting the preview of all previews before it even hits the shelves. So up first is getting clear on where you're coming from before you decide on where you're going. Many times folks are so excited to make their next move that they aren't even sure how to assess where they currently are in their career. Next up, we are evaluating those experiences so we can start thinking about where you want to go. And then we're going to talk about establishing your personal and professional brand so that it aligns. Again, when you're making your next move, your brand matters so much. And the secret that I tell my clients is that if you think you'd like to make a next move, you should start working on it right now. You never want to wait to prepare yourself for your next move. I tell all of the people who I work with that it's important that you create a career that creates opportunities for itself, which means as you're doing the great work every single day in your organization, the work that you're doing, the brand that you're establishing, the people that you're meeting. I caught the end of the last session when they were talking about sponsorship. We want to make sure that your career and the good work that you're doing brings opportunities to you. So you have less of the experience of putting your job out into an abyss and applying and applying and applying and applying and hoping someone replies. You have the opportunity to position yourself as a leader so opportunities flow to you. And last but not least, we need to put this plan into action and also talk about how to advocate for yourself in the workplace because there is no better advocate than you. So before we get into this, when people hear transitioning into a career you'll love, they generally think it's one of these 4 things. So any type of career movement inside or outside of your company, graduating for college, accepting a promotional or lateral opportunity, or accepting a opportunity in a new industry. Many times when people think career industry, they assume that you're switching from higher education to corporate America or from tech into finance. They think it's this huge transition, but a career transition can literally be any of these 4 things. Or it could also be the mental transition of moving from being just another employee to truly becoming a leader in the workplace. That is what I want to make sure you internalize today when you're speaking with me, is that anyone can be a leader. I do not care what your title is. I do not care what role you're currently in. I don't even care where you're trying to go. We're going to get there. Trust and believe we're going to get there. But A leader is more about your personal and professional brand and how you position yourself, and so much less about your title. I can't see the chat and everything else, but when we're done with the presentation today, I will be doing a Q&A. But I do see some things popping up. Please be sure I will go back through at the end. I have some help from the Fairygodboss team to make sure that we can answer all of your questions, but please keep on chatting. So first and foremost, you must get clear on where you are coming from before you decide where you are going. So this all starts with self-assessment. Now, there are so many different assessments that you can take today. Many people believe in StrengthsFinder, the Holland assessment, StrengthsFinder, MBTI, all of these different things. Strengths Profile now by Capfinity. There are so many different types of self-assessment. But today, I want you to just take a deeper look at your past experiences. I want you to be empowered to know that you can look at your past experiences and use that to really catapult your career forward. So that starts with transferable skills. It's important that you take a look at where you've been before you determine where you're going. This is a simple exercise that I make sure I do with everyone who works with me. And I always talk about this whenever I'm doing personal and professional development work with my clients. Sorry, clearly I have a little bit of a cough today. I'm not sick. I think I just got something in my throat. So what you'll do is you'll start to talk about every job and employer you've had on the left side. And then you'll look and see what are the acquired skills or competencies that you've gained from that role. And please, I will tell you from right now that even though you may not like a job, it does not mean that you did not acquire skills and various competencies. So what you'll see here are different jobs, and these are actually jobs that I've held throughout the span of my own career. So I started my career right after undergrad in a marketing assistant job at a office supply company. Fun fact, in my book I share, I didn't really like this job way too much. Wasn't really a fan. But I learned amazing things about customer service, data management, and relationship building. My marketing assistant job was really about identifying how to create pricing structures for different clients. And it really was helpful information, but at the time, I didn't really like it too much. My next role out of college, I worked as an assistant director of admissions at a college. And here I really fine-tuned my presentation skills and got much more in touch with a student-centered approach. From going from an office supply company to working back in higher education, student-centered approach was really something that is helpful for you to dig into when you work in higher ed. Next up, I started my career in career development. I worked at a few different universities and I honed in on assessment measures, collaborations, and overall career theory. And one of the reasons why I say I'm a career and leadership development expert is because my experience comes from working with students who are age 18 to alumni who are in their 60s across all different industries. I've worked with folks from engineering to criminal justice to marketing, HR, business, all different types of fields. The only folks who I don't really work with are doctors and lawyers. Those are the two that I say I don't touch too much. But I learned so many different things in how career theory applies to various industries. After you think about doing this, so you have the job title on one side, your employer, and the next side you have acquired skills and competencies. And this is just a sampling of my jobs, by the way. There's quite a few more, but we want to make sure you do this for all of your jobs. So go through the longest version of your resume that you have. I want you to move into figuring out what things you want to continue to do and what things you want to stop doing. So cross out things that you want to stop doing and circle the things that you've enjoyed the most. So like I shared earlier, Data management wasn't really for me, but I loved relationship building. I'm here today speaking with y'all. So presentations and speaking is something I love. And I also love fostering an environment where there's a lot of collaboration between different departments to achieve a common goal. This is a simple assessment that I want you to consider before you make your next move so you can quickly identify the skills that you'd like to apply to the next job. Now, many times we spend all of our time looking at job descriptions and company information. But the question I like to ask is, have you ever created a job description for your ideal job that speaks to your own skills, interests, and passions? Many times folks will say no. They've never taken that time. And by doing this quick exercise, it allows you to think a little bit more about what are the things that you like to do. What are your strengths, your skills, your interests, and how you can put those into a career? When we say transitioning into a career you'll love, I really mean that you should love your job. Sure, we all have our days, but if you're spending 40 plus hours a week, and during this pandemic and virtual work, I know I work a lot more than 40 hours a week sometimes. We want to make sure that you're building a career that you thoroughly enjoy. So, when you're thinking about a career that you'll love, I want you to think about your strengths, plus your interests and your core values. All of these three things come together to pull together a career that you'll love. We can identify companies, we can identify mission and vision statements, but if you don't start with you, if you're not able to start with what you love and what you value, it is very hard, A, for you to go through an interview process and identify a company that fits with what you'd like, and B, for you to be truly happy in the work that you do. So these three things are the first part that I want you to consider as you're thinking about whatever your next move is. Next, we want to evaluate your past experiences so we can better understand where it is that you want to go. Your problem is to bridge the gap that exists between where you are not and the goal that you intend to reach. By the end of this presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit more about developing your own career strategy so you can create your own roadmap to wherever you'd like to go. And many times when people create a career strategy, they just think about, this is where I want to be in 6 months, in 1 year, 18 months, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. And they quickly think like, this is where I want to go. I need to jump to these areas. But the key in developing a career strategy is figuring out the gap. There is always some type of gap that it is your job to bridge. So if you think about right now, let's say that you are a manager at a company and your next promotion will be to a director role. What is the gap in between being a manager and a director? What are the skills, experiences, knowledge that you need to have to move from being a manager to a director? And in your career strategy, your goal is to figure out what you need to do in between to get from point A to point B. So the question I want to ask you is, where are you right now in your career? This is a quick way that I identify where my clients are and where their next move needs to be. So these are 4 talent designations, and many times I'm going to walk you through them. People want to jump to new role, new experience, but I want you to really think a little bit harder about where you are. So the first designation is right role, right time. That means you still have room to grow in your role. Generally, you've been in a role less than 18 months. You kind of know a little bit about where your role is, but you're still needing to build more relationships, to identify different places in the organization where you can help. You're just really mastering the work that you're responsible for every single day. Next up is right role, new skills. This is when you got your job done, right? You're probably at that 18-month mark, maybe 18 months to 2 years. And you're getting a little itchy. You still know that you need to understand more things about the organization. You have a few good relationships, but you probably don't have a true mentor yet. You know your team, but you don't know the other adjacent teams. You probably don't know the leaders who are on the same line as your boss, but you know you need to do something else. You need that stretch project. You need a little something extra. That's where right role, new skills happens. Next up is new role, new skills. This means you need to truly and formally expand your role or responsibilities. This is what I love to call a power lateral. Many times people just want to move from manager to director, director to VP, whatever the next jump is. But sometimes there needs to be a bridge role in between, something else that will just help you take your career up a little bit more. So for instance, when I think about my career in higher education, I held several different roles because there were gaps that I needed to attack. My goal, well, before I made a lot of other moves, my goal was to become a director of career services. And I knew that there were different areas I needed to touch. So to be in career services, I needed to, of course, understand student development and work with different students. I needed experience working with alumni. I needed experience doing more operations, more assessment. So I did that. I needed to understand like marketing principles, and then I needed to understand larger collaborations on different scales at the university. All of these different moves didn't have to be a counselor to a senior counselor to a manager to an assistant director to an associate director. Some of those moves were lateral. And sometimes that means you'll take a role that is in line just to get new responsibilities, new projects to help you get to the next level. New role, new skills is a special area. And sometimes people jump to new role, new experience a little too early without getting the proper experiences. Now, new role, new experiences, that is when the world changes, right? That is when you probably feel like a fish out of water. You in a new role, you have a new team, new leaders, new people, everything is new. And that experience brings you all the way back to right role, right time, because everything is new and you're essentially starting the career development process over at that job. So as you're thinking about it today, I'd love to know where you are in your career right now. Feel free to add that into the chat. And if you're unsure of where you are, these are some key questions to ask yourself. So when you're in the right role, do you know where your company puts you? Where are you in that company? How does your role fit? What are you impacting? Have you made changes to the existing tasks in your role? Have you innovated as yet? Have you collaborated? Is there anything that would be helpful for you to learn right now before moving to your next job? I see a lot of you, so new role, new experience, right role, right time. If you're in transition, I saw that pop up in the chat too. I could see a little bit right here. So if you're in transition, where were you at your last job? So it's not that you have to be in a role right now. Where were you at the last job? Were you in the right role, right time, right role, new skills? So of course, wherever you're going next is probably going to end up being a new role, new experience. But as you're creating those applications and you're putting things out, you have to understand where you are to make sure that you're applying for the right level of role. So many times, okay, so I saw some of you are in the right role, right time. Okay, perfect. So when you're looking and applying to jobs, you want to make sure that you're aligned with where your skill set is. So should you be applying if you transitioned out of the workforce, if you were laid off, unfortunately, you want to make sure that you're applying to, do you need to go back into that same role because you need more time there? Do you want to kind of pivot and take on a new skill set in a lateral move or a bridge role, like I said? Or were you there long enough where it's like, oh no, like this is my time to do new role, new experience? And then the key question on the new role side is like, is there a next step? What are the key takeaways? Have you built strong relationships and advocacy for your work in this role? One of the things I share with anyone who has ever reported to me, I pride myself on being a pretty good boss, just for the record, because I love developing folks. Once I know that you understand your job, we're going straight into development to make sure you're positioned as a leader for my role or whatever job it is that you want. The big question I challenge people with when they're like, hey, I'm ready for a promotion is what is the impact you've created? What is the legacy that you've left? Now, legacy makes it sound daunting, but what is the innovation? How did you improve upon your role? What did you do? In many jobs, you may not be the first person in it. You were essentially filling someone else's shoes when the role came in. But how did you improve upon those shoes, right? Are they the same dusty shoes that you came into? Or did you come in and you upgraded those shoes? You have a brand new pair of shoes. Now, I'm not a heels person, so for me, they probably wouldn't be Louis Vuittons, but I would say maybe I got a brand new pair of Nikes, or I got another pair of the Rothy's flats with the pointed toe, because I'm not a heels person. But what are those shoes that you created when you were there? You have to think more about your impact and your innovation when you're going into that new role, new experience, and new skills, because that is what sells your personal and professional brand. That is what the company is going to hold on to, because they're going to be like, oh my gosh, I need Denise to come into this role. You saw what she did over there. I need her to come over here and do that same thing. That's where people really start to see progress in their interview process, when they're able to tell the story of the innovation that they did in that role. So when it's the new role, new experience, we talked about these, but the key stories I want you to be able to tell is, tell me about a time when you managed a project from end to end. What was your biggest accomplishment or challenge in your last role? Tell me about a time when you were able to innovate on an existing project with your peers. These answers will help you articulate your value. And when you can articulate your value, that's when you can negotiate a higher salary. A lot of times people think about a salary. I know I'm located in the tri-state, so I'm in Newark, New Jersey. I can see New York City from my window. People are like, well, Kim, I live in New York. I need more money because I need more money to actually live in New York. Of course, we know we can't necessarily talk about that. We can't talk about the personal reasons why we need more money. But when you articulate your value, that positions you for a higher salary. In my book, I walk through the salary negotiation process. And one of the number one things I share is that you begin articulating your value from the first conversation you have with anyone at that company. The first conversation is when the value proposition has to start. If you want to be where the money resides, you have to show your value. And the value resides in your impact in the workplace. So I'm going to say that one more time. The money resides where the value resides, and the value resides in your impact. Many times people think about the salary as their simple exchange with the company. Like, I'm doing work, like this is the salary, they're paying me for the work. But many times, like, your salary is also about your contribution. It's about your impact. It's about your ability to innovate. It is your ability to change the game at the company. Especially when we talk about COVID-19, companies have had to innovate at an accelerated rate during this time. They want folks to come in and, of course, do the work, right? Continue to move the company forward. But they want you to come in and ensure that no matter what role you're in, you're helping the company progress. And people who help companies progress and innovate make a lot more money than folks who sit behind a desk and they just do their job every single day. I love doing my work because I feel that whenever I'm speaking at an engagement, it is Tuesday. What time is it? It's 2:20 Eastern Standard Time on a Tuesday, and you are here tuning into a presentation about career and leadership development. To me, that already tells me that you are a high performing professional or someone who's dedicated to their own growth, because you are spending your free time listening about career and leadership development. There's a whole day of programming by Fairygodboss, which tells me that you want to make an impact. You care about innovating. So when you're thinking about making your best move, I want you to think about what is the impact and innovation that you've created along the trajectory of your career, and how can you tell that story in your next internal or external move to continue to create an impact at a new company and a new department with a new team, whatever that next move is for you. So, establishing a personal and professional brand that aligns with where you want to go. Personal and professional branding is one of my favorite things to talk about, my absolute favorite things to talk about, because this is the feeling that someone gets when they interact with you. It is the experience that you create. Cultivating relationships starts with the experience you provide to anyone who interacts with you. So people always joke when I say this, but honestly, I'm going to say it anyways because people get it when I say it. When you interact with me, my goal is to give you the Kimberly B. Cummings experience. Yes, I'm talking about myself in the third person. I want you to feel that you are connecting with me, that I care about your career and leadership development, that I am a credible source for the information you need about your career. If we were in person, I have a rule that whenever I have a speaking engagement, the moment I get within a radius that I can meet someone who's going to interact with me at the engagement, I put it on. I'm not going to be that person who's quiet and I'm going to sit in the green room and you can't see me until I come on stage. It's important to me that when you meet me at an engagement, that I am giving myself to you in the engagement, in my words, and your interaction with me. I want to talk to you. I want you to pull me aside and ask me questions. That's the experience that I want to create. Now, as a speaker, it's a little bit different than being in the workforce. When you think about you in the workforce, what is it that you want attached to your name? What do you bring when you are sitting at the virtual table in your office? What is the perspective that people can count on you for? That is your experience. What do people know you for? What do they say in rooms that you're not in? In the last conversation, when they were talking about sponsorship, having a sponsor is when someone can pull you up from where you are and put you to where you probably rightfully belong. But you would not have been able to do that on your own. And in order to do that, your sponsor has to sell you in that room and say, hey, I saw Karen doing this project and she was incredible. She's consistently able to innovate on this project. And I know that if in this role, if we give her the opportunity, she is going to take our company to the next level. You're not in that room. Your sponsor has to talk about you. And your sponsor can't talk about you if you don't have a strong personal and professional brand. That's why it is so important. They have to sell your experience, sell your personal characteristics in order to make sure that they can get buy-in from other people to move you to the next level. So when we talk about your experience, this is comprised of your character, actions, skills, and experiences. If we break this down again, it's your internal and external sides. So your character and actions, these are things who are innate to who you are. Your character can also be seen as your core values. What is it that matters to you no matter where you are? So if you think about the Strengths Finder, so in my character, I innately have a lot of discipline. And it's not discipline in that I'm like a rule follower. I'm someone who needs process. So whether you're my best friend who's moving to a new city and I develop your spreadsheet of all the apartments and the amenities that we're putting together, or we are in a meeting and I'm building out a strategic plan for you. That's just who I am. I have discipline in that way. My actions, I believe early is on time and on time is late. I do my best to always be on time and run on time. It means so much to me because I think it's a sign of respect. Those are things that I always try to do no matter where I am. On the external side, your skills are what we talked about earlier when we did that assessment of where you worked and what you've gained. And again, sometimes it doesn't necessarily have to be work experiences. What are the things you're doing outside of work? Where do you volunteer? What boards are you a part of? What activities do you participate in? Your skills can come from a whole bunch of things, and your experiences are much more work related. Those are the things that you're doing every single day in your job that you've learned from your degree program, all of those things. And this puts together your experience. How do folks experience you in the office at 7 a.m. or 6 p.m.? I've been in a work culture where, we meet all the time. I had a global job, and if I had to meet with folks in India, I definitely would hop on a call at 5:30 if I had to. When I meet with counterparts in Australia, I guess I'm on the phone at 7 p.m. How do they experience you during team gatherings, during high stakes presentations, when you're unsure of what your next steps are, when you're just shooting the breeze, when you have to repeat yourself, when there is a change that you have to adapt to? This is all about your experience in the workplace. And I'm not saying these things to kind of put pressure on you to show up in a way that you feel is inauthentic to who you are. I'm sharing this so that you can be aware of how folks interact with you on a daily, weekly basis, and you can be aware of how they experience you, which is also very important. When we think about your network, many times there's you at the center and there's a few people along the side. But as we're thinking about your network, I want to break it down just a teeny more. And if you haven't put questions in the chat, please feel free to put questions in. We'll be breaking for the Q&A in just a few moments. So when we talk about your network, again, generally it's you in the center and there's a few folks around the side. But I want you to think about the relationships that you need as you're transitioning into a new career. You need colleagues, people who are internal and external in your industry. You need teachers who help you build a skill set. You need mentors who are advisors. You need sponsors who can advocate and support your career. And you also need peers in your current company. Now, I break this down a little bit more because many people will look at this slide and be like, Kim, I have mentors. Like they're supposed to do everything, right? No, not every mentor can do all of these things. You may be very lucky and have a mentor who's also a sponsor and a teacher, but that doesn't always happen. So when we're talking about colleagues, you need to also have an external perspective as well. Many companies have a core value that they lead with an external perspective, meaning that they're not just stuck in the company that they are in. They're thinking about what their competitors are doing, what is happening. It's important that you build relationships with people inside and outside of your company so you understand what's happening. For your teachers, these are people who help you improve skills in a safe environment. Now, this doesn't have to be someone who has more power, less power. It could be a peer, anyone who can teach you how to do something. One of my husband's friends consistently helps me in Excel. Consistently. I don't know what it is, but making a pivot table, pivot tables are hard. I don't know why I can't get them to work the way they need to work, but I have teachers who help me exclusively in Excel. When I had to work on doing presentations for my clients and for interviews years ago, one of my mentors was also able to break down my presentations and teach me how to present. Your mentors give that real-time feedback and advice as needed. The way I always say that a mentor is, it's someone who you probably have a lot of access to. If you have a tough day at work and your boss gives you some feedback that really rattles you, generally you should be able to call your mentor to help you process. You may not be able to call a sponsor like that. Your sponsor, again, is that lift up. They have to be in a senior level role. Your mentors do not have to be. Your mentor could be a peer. It could be your boss. It could be a whole bunch of people, but your sponsor has to be senior. And your peers support you in your day-to-day role. People who say that they don't like to network, they don't need relationships. I always say at the minimum, you need peers. Because if you want to grow in your organization and your peers don't like you, it's going to be hard. Collaboration is so important. You need to have good relationship with your peers in different departments, in your department, to make sure that they can support you in your day-to-day responsibilities. You want your network to look like this. You want to have all of these different people around you, and then their network is also connected to you. That's where when you think about LinkedIn, the yellow dots around will be like your first connections, and the two arrows will go into your second and third connections. That's the goal when you're building your personal and professional brand and beginning to build those strategic relationships. Now, last but not least, before we move into questions, is we want to talk about putting your plan into action and truly advocating for yourself in the workplace. Without a career strategy, it is not uncommon to feel unmotivated, like you're just working to work, you're dissatisfied, and you just feel stuck. In my book, I talk about the first time I ever felt stuck in my career, and I was devastated. I had no idea what to do because I felt like I couldn't move and I didn't have any idea of what to do to fix it. And through years of helping myself and investing in my personal and professional development and trying different strategies, I learned what to do. And one of the biggest things is having a career strategy so you have a plan in place. And when you're building your strategy, you need that self assessment that we talked about. We need those short and long term objectives, which serve as your milestones. So that's 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 2 years. And we also need to think about the long term, which is where do you want to be in 5 years and 10 years? Those goals are definitely a moving target, but you need to have them to help anchor yourself. Because whenever you feel stuck, whenever a move or shift happens in your career, you have to decide, is that 5-year marker still where you'd like to go? And if not, it's time to readjust and augment your plan. Of course, you need to evolve and showcase your professional brand to make sure that you're able to deliver value to whoever you're serving. And you also need to elevate your authority. I do a whole training on elevating your authority, but to touch on it today, this is really role mastery. When you're ready to make your next move, role mastery is key, regardless of your level of seniority. You don't want to be just hopping from job to job to job because you're bored. You want to say that you have accomplished something, you have innovated, you have mastered your role, and you have a thing. Many times people can become generalists in their career, meaning they're a jack of all trades doing lots of things. But my goal for anyone who works with me, I talk about it in the book, I want you to be a specialist where when you walk into a room, people know that you do this. And ultimately, this is what it looks like, building a career strategy. I have an updated document like this that I share in the book that you're able to download. And it kind of goes over your strengths, your opportunities, what your ideal environment is. And what is your current state, 6 months, 1 year, and you go on and on, you figure out what is the gap, how will you know you achieved it with your milestone, and what are the tasks that you need to do in order to get to the next level in your career. So I know I want to leave time for questions today. So I'm going to put my contact information up so you can see it. And I know that we have someone from the Fairygodboss team who's going to help me moderate the chat. I will take down the presentation in just a moment. So please feel free to reach out to me, KimberlyBCummings.com, at KimBCummings on all of your social media platforms. And I hope that you grab my book so you can get deeper into what we talked about today.
Thanks so much, Kimberly. On behalf of everyone, I can say I know I was furiously taking down notes this whole time. This was a really great presentation, and we thank you so much for being here.
Oop, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry, I was muted somehow, working from home, troubles as it is. But I want to say thank you so much for a really great presentation. I know I was furiously taking down notes, and I think everyone else was as well. But you talked about networking, and I want to jump into this question from Laura here. She asked, what's the best way? Do you have any advice on making connections and networking, especially when you're looking to transition into a new field?
Got it. So when you know you want to transition, I highly recommend trying to give yourself as much runway as possible. It takes the average person about 6 months to find a new job. So the second you have an inkling that you'd like to make a move, start looking through your network to determine where are folks that you can connect with to better understand that field. One of the biggest mistakes candidates make in going into interviews that almost immediately discounts them from the process when they interview is not having the proper language of the industry you want to move into. So getting to know people in the field, in the industry, first, make the conversation all about them. People like to talk about themselves. So when you reach out, it's saying something like, I'd love to learn a little bit more about how you work in XYZ field and the work you do as a XYZ manager. Would you be willing to hop on a 15-minute conversation to share a little bit more about your experience? And on that call, make sure that you build out questions to ask them and give them time to really go back through and talk about your career and build a relationship so that you can continue to reach out over time and then transition to talking about yourself. But definitely give yourself time to have those and cultivate those relationships, I always liken it to dating, right? People want the networking relationship to like go so quick, but the same way they say that you can't go into a date and talk about marriage on the first date, it's the same thing if you go into a networking conversation and be like, hey, could you help me get a job at your company? It doesn't work that way. It needs time.
I like that analogy. I think that's a great one there. Great question from Susan, who's starting a new job this month. So first off, congrats, Susan. That's really
Yes.
exciting. She wants to know, what's your advice for starting with a good foot forward to help build your brand, but without criticizing current practices and building trust with that new team?
Oh, I love that. So, in the end of my book, I encourage everyone who makes their next move to do a listening tour whenever they get a new job. So generally a listening tour is what very senior leaders do. So I don't know what level you're at, Sue, but no matter what level, so anyone who's asking this question, I want you to do a listening tour, which means you determine all of the stakeholders who you will be meeting with, interacting with, collaborating with, understand where they are, and almost do mini interviews, understanding what is the work that they do, how do they work with your team, what are their challenges, what are their opportunities. And this could take some time. This could take 60, 90 days even. You'll see very senior leaders do a listening tour for 3 to 6 months sometimes. Get to know everything, make an assessment, build those relationships, and then come in synthesizing all of the information from who you met with and kind of go through what the opportunities are. I think when a leader comes in and they immediately like go for the gusto with the guillotine, we're not doing this, we're not doing this, we're not doing that, that is terrible. That's when people have resistance. But when they feel heard, understood, and you've really put all the information together in a thoughtful way, that's when it's a little bit easier to really make changes and get more buy-in.
That's great advice. We had a few questions kind of come in around something you talked about. Sarah specifically wanted to know, can you talk a little bit more about, you spoke about having your own thing. Is that something concrete? How do you find out what your thing is if you don't know right now?
That's a really, really great question. So your thing is generally what comes easy to you? What is it when you're in the workforce that when someone gives you an assignment, they know they can count on you for? What do your colleagues ask you for assistance with? When you get hired, what is the thing your boss said is like, I had to have you because you did this? That generally is attached to your thing and how people will want to continue to work with you, the skill that you're able to use to really bring value to the organization. So if you go back to that exercise we did first, and that was, of course, a smaller version to fit on a slide for y'all, think about the skill that you've consistently used, that you like to use, and drill that down. And if you don't have a thing, it may be time for you to experiment a little bit. It may be time for you to try a few different things, try different stretch projects to figure out, hey, I really thought I could make an impact here. I really liked doing it. And sometimes you could have a thing that you don't want to be a thing anymore. I got great at assessment, but I hated it. I always hire an analyst whenever I'm on any team because I'm not spending any time in Excel. I could do it, but I don't like it. And if you find that you don't like the thing that you have, then it's also time to think about what do you need to learn, what gap do you need to feel to kind of move into that next thing for you.
I love that, of making sure you're not just settling for the thing that you're currently with, and making sure it's the thing that you actually want. That's great advice.
Exactly.
Tanika here has a really, I think, important question that kind of relates to something one of our earlier speakers, Hannah, talked about. She talked about saying like yes to everything, but Tanika wants to know, what are some steps you can take to ensure that you're taking on the right projects? She said she's taken on projects with senior teams to learn, grow, get visibility, but sometimes those leaders don't even remember working with her. So how can she better identify those opportunities in the future?
So sadly, I feel like it's very hard to evaluate a project and know that it's going to do something, especially in a time frame that you would like for it to be done. So I empathize with you that like you've done some of the things and it didn't work out, and it can be very frustrating. So one, I would say build out your own career strategy. What are the actual projects that you need to take your exposure to the next level and to take your career to the next level? So you're a little bit more strategic with what you accept and how you reject certain things. And then find some time to connect with the leaders outside of the project. Many times we do the project and we think that's enough, but the relationship that comes out of the project is really important. And make sure that everyone can understand what your contribution to the project was. It's almost like a group project. If we go back to college, right? You have 5 folks doing the group project, and generally there's like 1 or 2 who actually did the work, and there's the one who just showed up that day and didn't say anything and they still got the grade. People don't know what everyone's contribution is. So it's important that as you're building the relationships, having the side coffee chats with the senior leaders to talk about your work, that they know what your contribution was. This isn't throwing anyone under the bus. It's just really talking about your own skills and your own experience. And that should potentially help you build better relationships to give you more exposure. And just talk about yourself too. When people ask about what you're doing, when you have your performance management process or performance appraisal process, don't forget to put all those things on there. Sometimes your leader may not know what you've done and how to magnify that. Do not be afraid to kind of shine a light on all the things that you've done to make sure that it's reiterated when the performance conversations come around too.
I love that advice of what we call it at Fairygodboss is bragging. Women don't brag enough. Brag about yourself. Like we want to hear about your accomplishments. And so with that, I am going to definitely put you on the spot right now, Kimberly. Please brag about yourself. What is your greatest accomplishment, either to date or this year? We want to know.
I feel like it's what I've talked about the whole session, but I will say it's writing the book because this was by far the hardest thing I have ever done in my entire life. And I definitely underestimated what it would take to write a book while running a business, while working a full-time job. I was an idiot, in all honesty. I should have gone on some island for 3 months and didn't talk to anyone. That's probably what I should have done. So the fact that I wrote it and it's good and it's going to be on somebody's shelf, I think is the biggest accomplishment that I'm proud of to date. And I think another one I would say I graduated from undergrad in 3 years and busted my butt. So I've always kind of climbed the corporate ladder a little bit faster. And I'm generally one of the youngest people in the room, but I've been able to do really well.
That's incredible. And writing a book is basically a full-time job. So congratulations on that. Congratulations on everything. With that, I'm going to wrap things up. But thank you, Kimberly, so much. Again, lots of love
Yep.
in the chat here. We really appreciate your time with us today.
Yep.
And just a reminder to everyone, we have breakouts going on. So make sure you return to the FGB Inspiration Summit link where you can attend one of our great breakouts. Thanks so much.